History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of Oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 589th episode of the History Goes Bump podcast, Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I'm your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Do you like how I introed myself in there, Kelly?
It was just a little halting compared to how you normally do it, so that's why I gave you that look.
Well, maybe that's because we're going to be doing a little bit of a different kind of episode. We're not going to be talking about a specific haunted location or even the ghost of a famous person who has passed on. We're going to be talking about a famous person who had a haunting at their personal home. And Kelly, this one is pretty darn scary and convincing.
I can't wait to hear about it.
Now, most people have probably never heard of Elke Sommer, but I'm sure if you've watched some older movies from back in the 60s, or maybe even a particular Love Boat here and there that she would have probably guest starred on, you would recognize her face. So we're really looking forward to bringing this to everybody. Before we do that, we want to welcome into the crew Vicky with an I, Kane with a K and an E at the end, and Eileen.
Thank you so much for joining the Spooktacular crew.
And now this moment in Oddity.
As Tapophiles, if Diane and I were invited to a meal at someone's home and our place setting was decorated as a tombstone, we would love the ambiance that our host had created. However, far before our current day, back in 89 AD, Roman Emperor Domitian hosted a banquet. This event is known to history as the Roman Feast of Death or Black Banquet. The soiree was macabre, and the guests at the party were senators. It was held in a black-themed banquet hall. The walls and ceiling were painted black. The dishes were black and topped with funerary cuisine of the time. Slaves dressed as apparitions brought the various courses of the meal to the guests, and each attendee had a headstone inscribed with their name. During the meal, Emperor Domitian spoke about death and slaughter. The emperor's goal was to instill fear in the senators, exerting power and control over his guests, who thought they may possibly be executed at any moment. Clearly, he delighted in the mental torture of his banquet guests. The senators likely spent the entire night wondering if they would be summoned for their execution. Instead, the next morning, Domitian sent messengers to notify the guests that their personal gravestones were made of solid silver, and that the gravestones and slave boys were a gift. The timing of the Black Banquet occurred during a period when Domitian's reign was marred by political instability and paranoia, hence why he felt the need to intimidate the senators. We all know that tomorrow isn't promised, and this Roman memento mori style of banquet certainly served as a reminder to the guests that it is important to enjoy life because we all must die. But the extent that Emperor Domitian went to for that extra flair and intimidation certainly is odd.
Are you afraid of the dark?
And now this month in history.
This month in history was suggested by Ruth Dempsey. In the month of June, on the 29th in 1950, Melitta Bentz passed away. Melitta was a German inventor and entrepreneur. Kelly is particularly thankful for this invention she is so widely known for, the paper coffee filter. From a young age, Melitta noticed practical problems and easily came up with solutions. In 1908, when Melitta was married with 3 children, she solved a problem that made her name famous, even today. At the start of the 20th century, coffee was being brewed by percolators which would oftentimes over-extract the coffee grinds, giving the resulting beverage a bitter taste. Cloth filters were already used in the process of making coffee, however, they were challenging to use and clean. Melitta pondered what could be used to produce a better-tasting cup of coffee by an easier method. In 1908, she removed a sheet of blotting paper from one of her children's notebooks, and with a perforated brass pot, she created the first paper coffee filter. Her results offered a cleaner, better-tasting cup of coffee, and her design was patented on July 8, 1908. Melitta and husband Hugo Bentz realized the commercial potential for her invention. I see, the husband saw the dollar signs. They began the manufacturing of her coffee filters in their home, but quickly graduated to factory production. Her invention is still in use today, having undergone few changes. Melitta Company remains a world leader in brewing equipment, coffee filters, and sustainable coffee operations.
Benedict Canyon. What isn't haunted about this place? Actress Elke Sommer and her husband at the time, Joe Hyams, moved into their Benedict Canyon Drive mansion in 1964. Not long after they unpacked their boxes, they became aware of strange things happening in the house. Some were subtle, but others woke them up in the middle of the night. The couple tried cleansing the house, but ended up running from the home after a mysterious fire erupted. They never lived in the house again. Join us for the story of the Elke Sommer haunting.
Kelly, let's set the stage here for our haunting with our 2 main players. We have Elke Sommer and Joe Hyams. Elke Sommer is a German actress known mainly for her movies from the 1960s and 1970s. She was born during World War II in 1940, and her family was evacuated from Berlin to Niederndorf. Her father was a Lutheran minister and died when she was 14. Elke had attended a preparatory school for university and really struggled with her studies. She asked her mother if she could drop out in 1957, and her mother agreed. Elke set off for London to work as an au pair. While she was doing that, she attended an English language institute 3 times a week. Sommer would eventually be able to speak 7 languages.
My.
The following year, she went to Italy for holiday and was spotted by film director Vittorio De Sica when she competed in a beauty contest. Her surname had been Schletz, and she was encouraged to change it, and she decided on Sommer.
What's interesting is she had a hard time with her studies, and yet she learned 7 languages?
Yeah, so she was kind of like you and I, Kelly, where math and science were kind of difficult for her, but the more creative type stuff came to her easily.
Gotcha. It didn't take long for Sommer to achieve sex symbol status, and she emigrated to Hollywood, where her popularity as a pinup girl exploded, particularly after she posed for Playboy. She would make 2 appearances in the magazine, first in September 1964, and the other in December 1967. Sommer was blonde and beautiful, with high cheekbones, and her acting career would be prolific, with over 99 movies under her belt by the time she retired in 2010. She starred as the leading lady in movies with Paul Newman, Bob Hope, Dean Martin, James Garner, Dick Van Dyke, Peter Sellers, and Sharon Tate. Sommer even won a Golden Globe in 1964 as Most Promising Newcomer Actress for the film The Prize. Some listeners may remember her from Hollywood Squares. She appeared on the game show many times between 1971 and 1980. A little fun fact was that in 1984, a bitter feud started between her and Zsa Zsa Gabor, which ended in 1993 with a multi-million-dollar libel suit, in which Gabor had to pay Sommer $3.3 million in damages for defamation.
Oh, Zsa Zsa, what have you done? Joe Hyams was born in 1923 in Massachusetts. He attended Harvard University but didn't finish because World War II erupted and he enlisted with the Marines. He fought in the South Pacific and received both a Purple Heart and the Bronze Star Medal. After the war, he went to New York University and earned both a bachelor's and master's. The New York Herald Tribune hired him as a journalist in 1951. A stroke of luck got him an interview with Humphrey Bogart. He was given a room at the Beverly Hills Hotel by his editor as a reward for a really great article. Apparently what he had done is he wanted to find out more about illegal immigration at the time, and so he went across the border to Mexico and then, I don't know how you would put it, embedded with a group of people who were coming back over the border.
Oh.
So whatever he wrote about that, they really liked it. So they're like, hey, go to the Beverly Hills Hotel and have a good time and all that good stuff. As he's lounging at the pool, he struck up a conversation with a man near him who turned out to be Bogart's press agent. The agent brought Hyams into the room where Bogart was, and Bogart asked what he wanted to drink. When Hyams asked for a Coke, Bogart got pissed and said, I don't trust any bastard who doesn't drink, especially a pipe-smoking newspaperman or a man who has more hair than I have.
Oh, my.
Now, Hyams must have been a guy with a lot of confidence because he picked up his notebook and headed for the door as he told Bogart, I don't drink and I certainly have more hair on my head than you do. Bogart told Hyams to wait a minute and invited him to lunch and gave him the interview because he was so impressed with his candor. Hyams was on a roll, and within a week, he had interviewed Lauren Bacall, Katharine Hepburn, Frank Sinatra, and Spencer Tracy.
Oh, wow.
So I can only imagine that Bogart was like, hey, you want to talk to some of my friends?
This guy has some chutzpah.
The Tribune was so happy they decided to keep Hyams in Hollywood, and that became his specialty. He worked as a syndicated columnist from 1951 to 1964. Hyams became a powerhouse in the entertainment industry, becoming someone that filmmakers relied upon, and many movie stars became friends with him. The long-lasting friendship he had with Clint Eastwood was legendary. Studio heads referred to him as the Dean of Publicity. Films that he worked on included East of Eden, My Fair Lady, Bonnie and Clyde, Blazing Saddles, The Exorcist, A Star is Born, Woodstock, Chariots of Fire, JFK, Unforgiven, Eyes Wide Shut, and Mystic River.
Oh my gosh.
So you listeners have definitely seen some things that he's done, I'm sure. All of these are amazing films, and 3 of them won Best Picture Oscars.
In November of 1964, Joe Hyams and Elke Sommer married. She was his 3rd wife, and he was 17 years her senior. The couple would eventually divorce after 17 years of marriage, and Joe would refer to them as the best years of his life. They were a good match as they were both deeply immersed in the scene of Hollywood, and they were about to be deeply immersed in the world of the paranormal. They decided to buy a home at 2644 Benedict Canyon Drive in North Beverly Hills, the same Benedict Canyon where the Manson murders took place and where the Paul Bern-Jean Harlow house is located. Both of those locations were haunted. Now we have a 3rd haunted location. It didn't take long for Joe and Elke to realize that their home was being shared with spirits. Hyams wrote an article for the Saturday Evening Post entitled Haunted, published in the July 2nd, 1966 issue, detailing their experiences.
And for those who don't know, you can subscribe to the Saturday Evening Post and get all of their archive editions. I'm going to be reading a lot of Saturday Evening Posts coming up. Because as I was going through there looking for this particular one, I was like, wow, look at all these stories. I mean, it's going back to talking about current events back in the day. So there's like articles in there about Bobby Kennedy and stuff. And I was like, I'm going to go back and read some of this stuff.
So cool.
And of course, they have some of the best artwork, as we all know.
That is true. And hey, you don't have to go through microfiche.
No! Oh my gosh! I hadn't thought about microfiche in a long time. And I know we have a lot of young listeners who are like, micro what?
I would literally get so nauseous trying to zip through the things.
Yeah.
Because I have like that situational vertigo thing going on.
Yeah. So here's what he writes initially. The first of what is by now a long series of inexplicable events occurred on July 6th, 1964, a few days after the moving men had deposited us in our new home in Beverly Hills, California. I was out, and my wife Elke had invited a German journalist, Edith Dahlfeld, for afternoon coffee. As Elke was about to pour the coffee, Mrs. Dahlfeld asked if she wasn't going to introduce her to the man. "What man?" asked Elke. "The one who was standing in the hall and just went into the dining room," said Mrs. Dahlfeld. "It must be Joe," said Elke. And of course, as he said, he wasn't there.
Right.
Our house has a center entrance hall with the living room on one side, the dining room on the other. The dining room is about 15 by 20 feet with a large window the length of one wall fronting on the driveway. Elke got up and walked into the dining room. It was empty, and so was the kitchen beyond. Mrs. Dahlfeld insisted she had seen a man and described him as husky, broad-shouldered, around 50 years old, wearing dark slacks, a white shirt, and a black tie. His hair was thinning at the top, and he had a bulbous potato nose.
So at this point, Joe and Elke haven't seen anything, just this guest at the house. Hyams explained in the article that he is a man of facts, not given to this type of fantasy, and his wife Elke fears nothing. She once killed a rattlesnake in their backyard with gardening shears.
I have to say that I think my wife is even better because you wouldn't have killed the rattlesnake. You just would have grabbed it and relocated it.
Yeah, I would have gotten my tongs and a bucket and moved it on. 2 weeks after moving in, they were about to have their reason and fearlessness challenged when Elke's mother came to stay.
The next incident took place about 2 weeks later. My mother-in-law, who was staying with us and sleeping in a downstairs bedroom, woke up to find a man staring at her. She insisted that he was standing at the foot of her bed, and just as she was about to scream for help, he vanished. At breakfast, I convinced her that the man could have been a prowler. Okay, I'm trying to figure out
much better.
how that's better than having a ghost.
Much rather have a spirit staring at me.
Since she was sleepy at the time, she may not have realized that he was looking in through her picture window. It had rained that night, so I went outside to search for footprints in the soft soil under the window. The ground was smooth and unmarked. It was about that time that we became aware of another phenomenon. Almost every night after we went to bed, we began hearing noises coming from the direction of the dining room. It sounded as though there'd been a dinner party and the chairs were being pushed back as the guests rose. At first, we joked about it, agreeing that it must be Edith's man rearranging the dining room furniture. But after a few days, I did take the precaution of cutting away all the branches, which might be rubbing against the dining room window.
So the couple are trying to explain these strange things with reason, even though 2 guests have now seen the same strange man in the house. It surely must be someone outside of the house. During the time of Manson murders and, prowlers and so forth, I would not want to think that. I would much prefer it to be a spirit.
No, I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. It's probably just some guy walking past. And it's not like these houses are in a heavily congested
high passer houses where you can put your hand on each wall.
Downtown area where you might have people walking by your house at some point. I mean, they're in the hills and there's vegetation and stuff around. He had to cut the trees back, obviously. So it's like, that to me is just not a better alternative.
Yeah, that is pretty troubling. The couple were also trying to blame the ghostly party sound on outdoor noises like trees. How do trees make party noises?
I mean, I guess a tree scraping against a window might sound like a chair scraping on the ground as it's being pushed back, but I think you're pushing it there.
The real test was about to come because Joe was left alone at the house for a few weeks while Elke went to Yugoslavia to make a film. Hyams felt like he was never alone during that time, as though something were always watching him. And then he started finding the window in the bedroom downstairs always unlocked and wide open in the morning, after he made sure everything was locked up tight. He also heard the front door open and close twice at night, but he always found it locked.
I'm sure it's just that prowler.
No big deal.
So at this point, Hyams decided to put the house under some surveillance. He picked up some electronic detection equipment and 3 miniature radio transmitters. He also got 3 portable FM radios and plugged a tape recorder into each one. He placed a radio by the driveway entrance, another at the front door, and a third on the bar in the dining room. And since the chairs were making noise, he used chalk to outline where they were on the floor. So you can see he's becoming an amateur paranormal investigator, even though he doesn't really know that's what he's doing here.
And he doesn't believe in that stuff.
Yes. That night, sure enough, the mic on the bar picked up the noises of chairs moving. So Joe picks up a .38 caliber pistol he had, and he creeps downstairs to catch the intruder. He flips on the switch, aims his gun, and nothing. The room is empty.
Womp womp.
Now, here's what's even weirder. The chairs were still within their marks. So the chairs sound like they're being moved, but they're not being moved.
It sounds residual.
Definitely. Here's what he wrote about what happened next. Upstairs, later, I listened to the tape recording. The noises had stopped when I went downstairs. The sound of the switch snapping on, and even my nervous cough, had come through clearly. And so had the sound of chairs being moved after I left the room again.
Oh.
So it's like the spirit is really playing with him. Because we could say this is residual.
But it's not,
But
because it's stopping when he comes in.
Yeah,
and
why
then
is
starts
it
right back
timing
up.
itself to, now that he's in the room, we're not going to make any noise. And then,
Yeah.
just as he turns his back, we're making noise again.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
Joe was unnerved enough that he invited a friend, Gordon Mueller, to come stay with him, and there was no activity during that time.
So again, if this is residual, why does it care that there's another person in the house?
Then Joe headed to Yugoslavia to meet up with Elke and left Gordon at the couple's house, and let's just say Gordon was not alone. He felt that the house was really creepy, and he stayed in the downstairs bedroom with the window that opened on its own. And the window opened up on its own. Gordon moved to the couple's bedroom since it had a lock on the door. I would do the same thing, I think.
I'd still be like, but if it has windows, clearly something is able to open the windows even
Unlock
if they're
them.
locked.
Mhm. A private detective kept an eye on the house and found doors and windows open, even though Gordon had locked it up tight before leaving. Joe and Elke returned, and the noises in the dining room continued, which stopped bothering them because it was such a regular occurrence. And again, but they don't believe.
Yes.
They left the house again for a trip, and Joe stopped by to get the mail, and their pool man, Marvin Chandler, was there. Marvin asked Joe if someone was staying at the house, and when Joe said no, he told him, "That's what I thought, but last Tuesday afternoon I saw a man in the dining room. A big man, about 6 feet tall, heavy built, with a white shirt and black tie. When I went to the door to ask him when you were coming back, he disappeared. Just seemed to evaporate in front of my eyes."
So I find it interesting that he would be like, hey, Joe, you got somebody staying at the house? It's almost like he wants to tell him something really weird, and I think it was a ghost, just happened to me. But he wants to kind of put it forward in a way that it's like,
I don't know. I kind of took it as I want to make sure that I'm not crazy.
yeah, maybe.
That I didn't imagine it.
I'm like, how do you bring it up to somebody? I think I saw a ghost in your house. So I just figured the best way for him to be like, is somebody staying at your house? Because this thing kind of happened.
Yeah, that's true.
Despite all of this, Joe still didn't believe that what was happening in the house was paranormal. He knew there had to be an explanation. When a friend suggested that someone might be squatting in the house somewhere, and indeed, this did happen back in the day. I remember in Colorado, there was an article about the Spider Man. And it was a guy who was living up in somebody's attic, and he would come down and help himself to the stuff in the refrigerator when they were sleeping. And so they'd be like, where's our food going?
Who ate my chocolate cake?
Yeah. Or
that would be Diane's response.
I know. I'd be like, you can have the chicken, but not the cookies. But then, people would sometimes hear sounds and stuff too. And there was that other story, I think, that we covered about a guy who was living in the wall of a house. So this is like stuff that did happen back in the day and probably still happens nowadays.
Yeah, I've heard true crime stuff where somebody's living in the attic over like apartments, and they'll pop down to multiple apartments.
Yes, exactly. So Joe decides to get the original blueprints for the house to see if there's any like secret rooms that they didn't know about. Nope. He had termite inspectors get under the house and see if there were any openings. Nope. Joe checked the attic for himself. Nothing. And thus began a time of soliciting the services of several mediums. Several claimed to see spirits in the house. One was supposedly a young woman who had died in Europe from a lung illness. Why she would be there, who knows? Another clairvoyant claimed a European man who had a mustache and was heavy-set liked to hang out in the dining room. And another medium who worked with the LAPD to find missing people said she saw a sloppy man who was in his 50s that had been a doctor and died of a heart attack. That claim was backed up by a visit from spiritualist Brenda Crenshaw. She went into the dining room and said, I see a man above average height, about 58 years of age, a doctor who died of a chest or heart condition outside the country. So you got to be thinking, why do they keep talking about these people who are like from somewhere else being in the house? Not that they died here. You've got this girl that they're saying is from over in Europe, died over there. And now you've got this guy who had some kind of a heart attack outside of the country. These last two, Brenda Crenshaw and then the woman from the LAPD, really hit home for Joe because he was in the process of writing a book about a doctor, and they hadn't been able to finish because the doctor died. The mediums had said that the ghost claimed to have unfinished business with the man of the house.
Oh my goodness.
So is that what we have going on here? He was working on a book with this guy, and then now he's here at the house? That doesn't explain why the dining room chairs are being pushed back.
True.
The only thing I can think of, and I would have loved to have had this information, is while you were working on the book, did he ever come to the house, and were you sitting in the dining room in the chairs while you were doing the book, and there's something locked in there?
The American Society for Psychical Research suggested that Elke and Joe hold some seances. They held 5 of them. Joe was unimpressed and felt that they got no information.
Yeah, he basically just described it as it was a lot of show and lights and all this other stuff. It was a typical seance.
So he asked the couple who had owned the house before him and Elke if they had experienced anything strange, and they had heard the noises in the house, particularly disembodied footsteps in the dining room. Once when this happened, it scared the woman so much that she called for a taxi. She told Joe, "I locked myself in the upstairs bedroom and called a taxi. A short time later it arrived and stopped in the driveway by the front door. I kept waiting for the taxi driver to ring the bell, but he didn't, so I shouted to him from the bedroom window. When he answered, I ran down the stairs, got into the car, and asked the driver why he had not rung the bell. The driver told me he saw a man standing by the door and assumed he was the fare. The man had vanished when I shouted from the window." She's lucky the taxi didn't take off out of the driveway.
Well, the only thing I can think of is however he vanished, he must have thought he just kind of walked back into the house, out of
possibly.
eyesight or something. But now this is getting more interesting because I've come up with this idea of, well, maybe he and this guy who had the heart attack were sitting at the dining room table working on this book. And maybe there's the sound of them pushing their chairs back from the table that's gotten locked in here for some reason. But this woman is talking about having similar sounds.
The thing is, the dining room chairs moving on their own, it stops when anybody comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's intelligent, because then as soon as you leave, it starts up again.
Yeah, and it's either moving the chairs and then putting them back in place, or it's not moving them and the sound is there. But I would think if it was scraping the chairs against the chalk would look like it had been moved a bit or something.
True.
I don't know for sure, but so this is just very fascinating. And yet we still have Joe not believing that this is anything paranormal or supernatural. Elke, on the other hand, was getting pretty scared after all of this. Joe is telling her what the previous owners had happened, and he even went back to the owners before those owners, and same thing. So this is something that's been going on in the house for a while. So she's like, I'm just really not very comfortable. So Joe agreed to have the house exorcised. Thankfully, he did not call the Warrens.
No kidding.
Although he might not have gotten better results here either. The clairvoyant who conducted the cleansing commanded the spirit to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. So at least she's going about this in kind of the right way of wanting to get rid of something. She then told the couple that the spirit left. At the time that Joe wrote this article in 1966, the couple had no intention of moving. And Elke concluded that the spirit was her father. So I don't know if the spirit just matched what her father would look like. Joe finished that article with, "That night, after the exorcism, I locked the downstairs doors, checked all the windows carefully, and went to bed anticipating a quiet night. Just as I was falling asleep, Elke nudged me and said, 'Listen.' I sat up in bed and listened. The dining room chairs were moving again." If this was residual, you can't just make that disappear. Residual does not respond to "get out in the name of Jesus Christ" or whatever. Maybe we have a couple of things going on here. We have the ghost, that's the guy, and then we also have whatever's going on with these chairs. So maybe we have 2 different things and the male ghost is left.
Joe Hyams wrote another article for the June 3rd, 1967 Saturday Evening Post. The couple had now been in the house 3 years, and they had left. Joe titled the article, "The Day I Gave Up the Ghost." The reason they left was a mysterious fire that started in the dining room. Joe wrote,
"Downstairs, I heard muffled laughter." Okay, this is the first time that we've heard them talking about hearing
any voices or
vocal
anything.
type stuff, and it's laughter. Gun in hand, I unlocked our bedroom door and ran into a cloud of thick, black smoke. Our poodle, Hasi, I think, Hasi, I'm not sure, barking furiously, ran out of our bedroom onto the landing and disappeared into the smoke, which you do not want to have happen. I closed the door, and as calmly as I could, told Elke, "There's a fire downstairs, and we've got to get out fast through the window." Well, Elke collected her jewelry in a bag and put on a housecoat because, of course, why wouldn't you grab the jewelry before you run? I telephoned the fire department. They recorded the call at 6:21 a.m. Before leaving, I opened the bedroom door with the vague hope of giving Hasi an escape route. Then I helped my wife climb through a wide casement window onto the roof, which sloped to within a few feet of the ground. Our bedroom was over the dining room, and from the heat of the shingles under my bare feet, I could tell that the dining room was on fire. Black smoke poured out of the dining room and living room chimneys. Elke and I ran to the kitchen in the rear of the house, where a dachshund puppy was sleeping. There were no flames in the kitchen, so I broke a pane, unlatched a window, and climbed in to rescue the puppy. I touched a closed door leading to the dining room. It was hot enough to blister my hand. Meanwhile, Elke climbed in after me, hoping to dash through the blazing dining room to rescue her poodle. I had to force her out of the house while she screamed that Hasi would be burned alive. Outside, we ran around front and looked into the dining room. Through the smoke, we could see the dining room table blazing.
Interestingly, one of the mediums had told the couple that she had a vision of a fire starting in the dining room, and she told Joe to up their fire insurance. He regretted not taking her advice. The fire was so hot that it melted their silverware. The reason the ghost may have set the fire? The couple had been told that making the place unfamiliar by redecorating might chase the ghost away. Maybe they just pissed it off. They had also been talking about moving, which may have displeased the ghost as well.
Or maybe it was trying to speed up their moving out. I don't know.
Could be. The fire was almost completely contained to the dining room, despite wall-to-wall carpeting and lots of draperies.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're having one of those spontaneous combustion kind of things happening here, where it basically just burned the main part of the haunting, which is the dining room table. So weird. And let me just say, Hasi did survive the fire. She appears in some photos that were taken after the fact.
Good.
The whole reason that they even were aware that there was a fire going on here is that there was a knock on the bedroom door. So despite the fact that it seems like the ghost knocked on the bedroom door to get them to wake up and maybe get out of the house, it was warning them, Elke insisted they move because something in the house, she thought, had tried to burn them alive. I don't know, because what if something else started the fire and the ghost was actually trying to help them?
Right.
So who knows which way this goes? And when they had some mediums come through later, Joe invited them to come through later, the one was like, the ghost did not set this fire. And most of them maintained that this was not something that the ghosts had done. Interestingly, Joe maintained in that second article that he and Elke still didn't really believe in ghosts.
This is crazy.
I mean, what does it take? They never did move back into the house, and it was bought and resold 17 times in the next few years and is privately owned today. And I don't know if that address that we gave you guys is the actual address, because I've seen several of them in different articles that are out there.
And sometimes articles will change the address just for privacy.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily go looking for this house because I don't know which one it is, and I only would know from seeing the pictures of the roof that it has the shingles, and I don't even know if it would still be that way today.
Probably not.
Through the years, numerous people had witnessed strange events at the house, so it seems like even after the fire, the haunting continued. Many people would claim to get such a weird feeling from the house that they wouldn't even enter the house. And before Joe and Elke ended up moving out of it and having the fire, they would try to rent it because they would leave for a while. And so they're like, well, let's go ahead and rent it to some of our, superstar friends out there. And nobody would ever rent the place. They would be like, okay, yeah, I'll take it. And then they would get to the door and be like, I can't go in.
Oh, wow.
Joe and Elke eventually divorced, and Joe died in 2008. Elke's still alive and living in Los Angeles. She's in her 80s. At the time of this, 2025, she's 84.
A photographer named Alan Grant came to the house after the fire to take some pictures for Joe's article.
And the couple did join him for that, and they even reenacted climbing out of the window onto the roof, showing him what they had done.
He was a skeptic when he arrived, but he was a believer by the time he left. He said, "Something happened that spooked me. On one roll of film that I shot in a particular room where they first spotted the ghost, there were about 4 or 5 frames of film that were progressively fogged down to the end of the frame, giving it a ghost-like appearance, especially of Joe Hyams, who was in the shot. When that was processed and I took a look at it, I thought, there's no way that would happen in the center of a roll. Something else had happened that I couldn't explain, and I've spent years as a photographer, and that had never happened to me before. Something did happen in that house." Grant reasoned that a sticky shutter or sticky diaphragm could cause some of the issues. But with some of the pictures, both of those things would have had to have happened, and he said that would be quite the coincidence.
We saw the pictures, and they are kind of weird. I can't explain it. I mean, you could have maybe one picture in a roll that gets kind of some weird, cloudy, ghosty kind of thing on it for some reason. But it would be like one picture was clear, and then the next one had that. And then the next picture would be clear and then have the ghosty kind of thing going on. They were really weird pictures, and I can't explain it. And I mean, obviously it's back in the 60s, but this is a photographer who would have developed his own film. He was in control of everything. He would have made sure that the lighting and everything was good. He's a professional. So this really should not have happened. And the thing that I think is interesting through all of this is that Joe and Elke never saw the spirit. It only appeared to other people. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it is strange.
It's like, why would he not show himself to them?
I don't know, unless maybe just in their skeptic brains, they just didn't believe enough?
Maybe. That's an interesting theory, Kelly. Is what we see based on what we would be able to believe? What level we're at about that? Or
maybe.
Although there's a lot of people who are skeptical and then they see something. I feel like if they actually saw the ghost and then it disappeared, they would have been like, yep, it was a ghost. This place is haunted. They wouldn't have kept maintaining that, no, this is nothing. And, who knows with the fire? Maybe it was somebody else who would have set it on fire. I'm just trying to figure out, how does it start in the dining room? If it was somebody who set fire to your house, wouldn't have started somewhere on the outside?
One would imagine.
In the end, Joe and Elke had 36 sensitives and mediums come through the house, and while none could agree on who the spirits were, they all had the same conclusion. The house was haunted. Was the haunting of Elke Sommer real? That is for you to decide. I believe it.
I do too.
And the fact that he kept putting out that they were skeptical and didn't believe this, they weren't getting any money for this or any fame for this. I'm sure he didn't get paid a lot for writing these 2 articles for the Saturday Evening Post. And at that point, he might have even been opening them up to some kind of ridicule.
That is true.
And this was a beautiful house. It was like their dream home, and they end up having to run from it and having it maybe almost kill them.
Very sad.
Yeah. We read about all these poltergeists and hauntings, and a lot of the time I'm like, well, I don't know. It seems a bit over the top. This wasn't really over the top. It was very subtle kind of stuff. They see a spirit, they hear chairs moving around, hearing some laughter, disembodied footsteps. The fire is the only thing that's kind of, whoa, way out there. The fact that it was just so subtle makes me really want to believe it as well. What do you guys think? We'd love to hear what you have to say about that. You probably haven't heard a whole lot about this haunting because it was pretty new to us as well. And we love Hollywood and older Hollywood kind of stuff. So
definitely.
Right up my alley. And Elke Sommer, she got her big breakout in a Pink Panther movie. So, what's not to love about a blonde bombshell who has a very good comedic sense?
True.
We'd love to have you guys check out our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to send us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com. We did hear from Eileen, and she had suggested the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island for us. And so I let her know that we actually had covered the whole Mackinac Island in general, not just the Grand Hotel. And, she'd pointed out, of course, somewhere in time was made there. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, yes, it's one of our favorite movies. We have it on DVD. And so we knew that for sure. She went on to let us know that one of her favorite haunted locations is the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego. They visit there very often. My 11-year-old son, Waylon, and I like to ghost hunt there. I'll have to send you a picture of the last time we were there. He has this ghost app on his phone, and he caught something really cool. It's hard to know if these apps are real, but I think this one is sort of interesting. And so then she sent me the picture, Kelly, and it was on the GhostTube app, and I think the GhostTube app has like an SLS version, because what she sent to me with the picture is what looks like a body that's mapped out like an SLS camera.
Right.
It's at the end of this hallway, and it looks like whatever this is would have to be floating because it's not completely on the ground, but it also would have to be really tall, Kelly,
Yeah, it does look very tall.
because its head is almost touching the ceiling, and it's kind of got its hands crossed in front of it.
I'd love to see a picture of that hallway in that instance without the SLS.
Yeah, like a before and an after,
Right.
but there's no furniture or anything that are in the hallway that it would have been mapping. So I don't know. It's a very interesting catch. Obviously, with phone apps, we're not completely positive about what you get on those, but we definitely found that to be interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
I want to thank you all for joining us on this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
You can find History Goes Bump on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Google Play, and anywhere you can listen to podcasts.
This month in history.
History.
History. It's a history. I'm hinting that I'm about to talk about history.
Exerting power and control over his guests who thought they may possibly be executed at...
Bleh, bleh. At bleh. What is bleh? That's kind of a weird location. Bleh.
The senators likely spent the entire night wondering if they would be summoned I don't know what my mouth is doing. They decided to buy a home at 2644 Benedict Canyon Drive in North Beverly Hills. In North Bev Hootie.
Oh, is that how they call
It's
it?
just, yeah, it's a nickname.
That night, after the exorcism, I locked the downstairs doors.
Downstairs doors.
Downstairs doors.
Downstairs doors, okay.
Were a dachshund palpy.
It's
It was
a
a palpy.
But with some of the pictures, did you hear that whistle? Some of the pictures,
Gopher.
yep.